Imagine holding a biological time machine in your hand that could bridge a gap of 3,000 years. For the longest time, the history of the Jewish people was told through ancient scrolls, religious texts, and the crumbling stones of the Middle East. But a massive multi-year scientific study has just bypassed the history books entirely. By extracting viable DNA from ancient remains found in Iron Age tombs across the Levant, and comparing them to modern Jewish populations from all over the world, scientists have made a discovery that has left the academic world speechless. We are talking about a genetic link so strong and so specific that it has settled a centuries-old debate about identity, migration, and the persistence of heritage. This isn't just about finding a few common ancestors. This is about a genetic signature that has survived empires, migrations, and some of the most turbulent events in human history. Today we are going deep into the code of life to see exactly how the DNA of modern Jewish communities matches up with the people who actually walked the streets of ancient Jerusalem, and why these results have fundamentally changed our understanding of human history. To understand why this is such a biological miracle, you have to realize what DNA usually does over 3,000 years. Usually, as people move, marry, and migrate, their genetic signal gets diluted. It becomes a blur. If you take a modern person from almost any region and compare them to someone from that same spot 3,000 years ago, the connection is often very faint. But the Jewish story is unique because it involves a group of people who were scattered across the globe for 2 millennia, from the cold cities of Eastern Europe to the mountains of North Africa and the shores of India. These communities were separated by thousands of miles for dozens of generations. Conventional wisdom suggested that they would have blended so thoroughly into their local environments that their original Levantine signature would be gone. But the lab results suggest something completely different. The study began with the excavation of several ancient sites in Israel and the surrounding Levant, dating back to the Bronze and Iron Ages. These remains belonged to people who lived during the time of the First Temple and the early biblical kingdoms. Getting clean DNA from such old samples in a hot, dry climate is incredibly difficult because heat is the enemy of genetic preservation. However, using a technique that focuses on the petrous bone, a tiny, dense part of the inner ear, researchers were able to extract high-quality genomic data. This gave them the reference genome, the actual biological blueprint of a person living in ancient Israel 30 centuries ago. When the scientists compared this ancient blueprint to modern Jewish groups, the first stunner was the Y-DNA, the paternal line. They found that regardless of whether a Jewish man lived in New York, Moscow, or Casablanca, his Y chromosome likely belonged to a handful of specific lineages that are a direct match for the ancient Levantine samples. We are talking about the J1 and J2 haplogroups, which are the hallmarks of the ancient Near East. This means that despite 2,000 years of living in Europe or Africa, the male line remained almost entirely intact. The paternal anchor never moved. It was a clear, unbroken chain, linking a modern person back to a specific geography and a specific group of people from the ancient world. But the real mystery and the real surprise came when they looked at the autosomal DNA. This is the DNA you inherit from all your ancestors, not just the male line. This is the stuff that usually gets mixed up the most. When they ran the algorithms to see where modern Jewish DNA plots on a world map, they found something fascinating. Modern Jewish groups from almost every corner of the world don't plot with their neighbors. A person of Ashkenazi descent from Poland doesn't look like a person from Poland at the genetic level. Instead, they plot right next to the ancient samples from the Levant. It is as if the genome was frozen in time, carrying a heavy suitcase of Middle Eastern markers across the centuries. The findings showed that even for Jewish populations that had lived in Europe for over 1,000 years, about 50 to 60% of their entire genome is a direct match for the ancient Middle Eastern samples. This is an astronomical percentage for a population that has been away from its home for so long. To put that in perspective, if you had an ancestor who was half Italian, and then your family lived in Japan for 500 years, you wouldn't expect to still be half Italian. You would expect that signal to be almost gone. But in this case, the signal didn't just survive, it thrived. How did this happen? Scientists point to a phenomenon called endogamy. This is when a group of people primarily marries within their own community for religious or cultural reasons. For centuries, Jewish communities were relatively isolated from the surrounding populations. This social boundary acted like a genetic time capsule. It protected the original Levantine heritage from being absorbed into the larger European or North African gene pools. The DNA results are proof that culture isn't just about what you believe. It has a profound effect on the very biology of your descendants. As the researchers dug deeper, they wanted to understand the maternal side of the story. This is where the results got even more interesting and a little more complex. While the paternal line stayed very Middle Eastern, the mitochondrial DNA, passed from mothers, showed more variety. In some communities, the maternal lines were also Middle Eastern, but in others, particularly the Ashkenazi groups of Europe, many of the founding mothers appeared to have local European or Mediterranean origins. This tells a vivid story of the early migration patterns. It suggests that a group of men from the ancient Levant migrated to the Mediterranean and Europe, married local women, and then those communities became closed units. From that point on, they stayed genetically isolated for 1,000 years, locking in that specific mix of Middle Eastern and European DNA. This research has also put a final nail in the coffin of several fringe theories. For years, some people argued that modern Jewish populations weren't related to the ancient Israelites at all, but were actually descendants of the Khazars, a nomadic group from Central Asia who allegedly converted to Judaism. The DNA data categorically disproves this. When the scientists compared the Jewish samples to Central Asian DNA, there was almost zero match. The Khazar signal was missing. Instead, the match with the ancient Levantine skeletons was so precise that it proved a direct, biological lineage. The science isn't just suggesting a link, it is proving a geographical origin that is unmistakable. The study also looked at Sephardic and Mizrahi Jewish groups. These are the communities that lived in North Africa, Spain, and the Middle East after the exile. The results there were even more striking. Their match with the ancient Israelite remains was even higher than the European groups. Mizrahi Jews, who lived in places like Iraq and Iran, are genetically almost identical to the ancient samples found in the Levant. It's as if they never left, even though they were hundreds of miles away. This shows that the original population of the ancient Middle East was remarkably stable, and that the Jewish groups who stayed in the region are the direct biological heirs of that early history. One of the most emotional aspects of this study is how it brings forgotten communities back into the fold. For example, the Beta Israel community of Ethiopia had long claimed they were descendants of the ancient Israelites, but many people were skeptical. When their DNA was tested, researchers found a unique mix. While they have significant East African ancestry, they also carry distinct markers that are common in the Middle Eastern Jewish groups. It proves that there was an ancient migration to Ethiopia that carried the Levantine heritage deep into Africa, where it blended with the local population but was never completely lost. The technology used for this study is also a story in itself. We are now able to do shotgun sequencing on ancient bones. This means we take every tiny fragment of DNA we can find and use powerful computers to stitch it back together like a billion-piece jigsaw puzzle. This allows us to see things that were invisible even 10 years ago. We can see individual physical traits of ancient people. We now know that the people of ancient Israel likely had olive skin, dark hair, and brown eyes, traits that are still clearly visible in the majority of modern Jewish populations today. The physical resemblance isn't just a coincidence, it's a genetic instruction manual that has been followed for 3 millennia. But what about the unexpected matches? When the scientists compared the ancient Israelite DNA to other modern groups in the Middle East, they found that Palestinians, Druze, and Lebanese people also share a massive amount of this ancient heritage. This was a profound moment for the researchers. It means that the people who live in that region today, regardless of their religion or political status, are all descendants of the same ancient population. They are literally cousins. The DNA doesn't care about borders or conflicts. It shows a shared biological foundation that spans the entire Levant. The ancient Israelite remains didn't just match modern Jews. They matched the entire family tree of the Levant. This leads to a fascinating realization about human history. We often think of populations as being replaced. One group moves out, another moves in. But the DNA suggests that people mostly stay put. Even when empires rise and fall and religions change, the people on the ground usually remain. The modern Jewish population represents the migratory branch of that ancient family tree, while the modern Palestinians and Druze represent the branch that stayed in the soil. Both branches are rooted in the same ancient DNA that was extracted from those Iron Age tombs. The scientists also looked for specific Cohen markers. According to tradition, the Kohanim are the priestly class, descending directly from Aaron, the brother of Moses. This is a claim that can be tested because the priesthood is passed from father to son. When geneticists looked at the Y-DNA of men who claimed to be Kohanim, they found a specific signature known as the Cohen modal haplotype. What stunned everyone was that this signature was not only present in Cohen families from all over the world, but it was also found in the ancient samples from high-status burials. It is one of the clearest examples of a genealogical claim being backed up by biological reality over a period of thousands of years. As the data grows, we are also learning about genetic bottlenecks. About 700 years ago, the Ashkenazi population in Europe dropped to a very small number, perhaps just a few hundred people, due to various hardships. Because they grew back into millions from such a small group, their DNA is remarkably similar to one another. This bottleneck actually makes it easier for scientists to see the ancient Middle Eastern signal because it hasn't been cluttered by too many outside influences. It's a paradox of history. The very hardships that tried to diminish the population ended up acting as a biological shield for their ancient heritage. The study has also sparked a new interest in medical genetics. Because some Jewish groups have stayed isolated for so long, they have certain genetic markers that are helpful for studying rare conditions. But by understanding the ancient Levantine root of these markers, doctors are learning how to better treat their patients today. The DNA of a person 3,000 years ago is helping to save the lives of people in the 21st century. It is a beautiful loop of history and science where ancient remains provide the blueprints for modern health. How does it feel to see this data? For many in the scientific community, it is a reminder of how much of our story is silent. We talk so much about the wars and the kings, but the real story is in the survival of families. The fact that a 5-year-old child in a modern city can have the same genetic code as a farmer from 3,000 years ago is a testament to the incredible resilience of human life. It shows that we are much more connected to our ancestors than we think. We aren't just reading history, we are literally walking, breathing history. The Israelite match also tells us about the power of migration. It shows that a group of people can be uprooted, sent to the other side of the world, and still hold on to who they are. Their DNA acts like a compass, always pointing back to the place where their journey began. It challenges the idea that environment is everything. Even in the damp forests of Europe or the deserts of North Africa, the genome of the Levant remained true to itself. But science also warns us against oversimplifying. While the match is stunning, it doesn't mean that Jewish people are a monolith. There is a beautiful diversity within the Jewish world. There are members of the community who are converts, people who have joined the story from every race and background on Earth. Their journey is just as valid, and their contribution to the culture is just as vital. The DNA gives us the skeleton of the history, but the people provide the flesh and blood. The genetic story is a foundation, not the whole house. As we look to the future, the study of ancient DNA is only going to get more detailed. We are moving from looking at groups to looking at individual lives. We might soon be able to reconstruct the specific family trees of people from the ancient world and find their exact living descendants today. Imagine finding out that you are the 90 times great-grandchild of a person whose house was just uncovered by archaeologists. That is the direction we are heading. The match between modern Jewish DNA and ancient Israelite remains is more than just a scientific result. It is a bridge across time. It tells a story of a people who refused to be erased, who carried their heritage across oceans and continents, and whose presence today is a biological miracle. It reminds us that our past is never truly gone. It is just waiting to be decoded. The stones of the Middle East have a voice, but so does the blood in our veins. And when the two speak together, they tell a story of continuity that is absolutely stunning. When we consider the vastness of human history, it's easy to feel lost. But studies like this give us a sense of place. They show that we belong to a long, continuous chain of human experience. The people who lived in the ancient Levant 3,000 years ago weren't just figures from a book. They were real people with families and dreams, and their legacy is alive today in millions of people. The stunning match is a victory for science, but it's also a victory for the human spirit. It shows that some things, the most important things, are never lost. They are written in the code of life, a secret message from the past that we have finally learned how to read. So, next time you see an ancient artifact in a museum or read a story about the ancient world, remember that the past isn't just something we look at. For many of us, the past is something we are. The match between the ancient and the modern is a reminder that we are all part of a grand, unfolding epic that is far from over. The DNA results have given us a clear look at the beginning of that epic, and it is more vibrant and more connected than we ever dared to imagine. The story of the Israelites isn't just a story of the past. It's a living, breathing reality that continues with every new generation. Stay curious, because the next breakthrough in our genetic history is just around the corner, and who knows what other stunning connections we are about to find.